Emma Carter sat alone in the dim light of her small apartment, a hum of the air conditioner barely masking the echo of her thoughts. The walls, once freshly painted, were now streaked with shadows and cracks, much like her own sense of belonging. In the world outside the military, she stared at a faded photograph on the mantel above the heater, a younger version of herself, eyes sharp and confident, dressed in her Navy SEAL uniform. The metals beside it reflected faintly in the flickering lamp, each one a testament to missions that had long since faded from public memory. To the world, Emma Carter was just another forgotten veteran. To herself, she was a warrior out of time, left to navigate a civilian life that felt alien and unforgiving. Her apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old books, the scent mingling with the lingering perfume of her own fatigue. On the kitchen counter, unopened bills lay stacked like a miniature city of responsibilities she didn't know how to conquer. Each envelope reminded her that the outside world operated on a logic she no longer recognized. Here, there were no clear objectives, no camaraderie forged in fire, no adrenaline-driven sense of purpose. There were just numbers on paper, deadlines. That mattered only to faceless institutions, and an unsettling emptiness that gnawed at her. Emma flexed her fingers absent-mindedly, tracing the worn grooves of her rifle replica propped against the wall. It wasn't an operational weapon, but it reminded her of the precision she once embodied. Her hands remembered the weight, the balance, the subtle vibrations that spoke the language of a trained sniper. In that quiet apartment, far removed from danger or recognition, she could feel herself slipping into memories that were both vivid and unbearable. The memories weren't just echoes, they were vivid, almost tangible. She could see the deserts of the Middle East stretching endlessly beneath her, feel the searing heat and grit against her skin. She remembered the missions, covert operations. Under the cover of night, intelligence gathering in hostile territories. The tense moments when one miscalculation could mean death for herself or her team. She remembered crouching in silence for hours, the only sounds her breathing and the faint rustle of the wind, waiting for a target that could change the course of an operation. And she remembered the successes, the lives saved, the threats. Neutralized, the impossible shots that only a SEAL sniper could execute. Yet none of that mattered here. Here, in her apartment, the medals collected dust. The accolades meant nothing when the world moved on, when the sacrifices went unseen and unrecognized. She thought about the colleagues who had left her behind. The military bureaucracy that celebrated heroes in speeches, but often forgot them in practice. Emma had tried to integrate into civilian life, briefly attending a college program, working odd jobs, volunteering at veteran support centers, but nothing replaced the clarity, the purpose, or the intensity of the missions she had known. She felt invisible, a ghost walking among the living, a shadow of her former self. Outside, the city moved with a rhythm she no longer felt connected to. Car horns blared, buses rattled down streets, and pedestrians hurried past, engrossed in phones and schedules. No one noticed the woman standing at the edge of the sidewalk, eyes scanning instinctively, the posture of a soldier ingrained after years of training. A child tripped nearby, and she reacted automatically, her hand outstretched to steady them, a reflex born of years protecting others. The parent thanked her absent-mindedly, but she felt the hollowness of the interaction. Here, her vigilance went unacknowledged, her skills unseen, her instincts irrelevant. Emma's nights were the hardest. Sleep was a battlefield in itself. Dreams transported her back to operations in distant lands, but they came with no end, no debrief, no sense of closure. She'd awaken drenched in sweat, heart racing, a quiet apartment a stark contrast to the chaos in her mind. She sometimes wondered if she'd ever feel at peace, if civilian life would ever offer the clarity and purpose she craved. The therapy sessions helped, a little techniques to calm her mind, exercises to ground herself, but they couldn't erase the sense of being left behind, a constant tug of a life she once led and the one she had now. Her apartment offered few distractions. Television felt hollow, and social media highlighted the lives of others without connecting her to anything meaningful. She sometimes picked up a book on tactics or history, reading about sniper operations, strategy, or military campaigns, immersing herself in the technical side of her former world. It wasn't the same as action, but it reminded her of her identity. Emma thrived in structure, in challenges that tested her abilities, and in environments that demanded focus and precision. Ordinary life offered none of that, leaving her restless and frustrated. There were brief moments of connection calls from a former SEAL buddy, letters from distant family, but they were fleeting. They reminded her both of the world she had left and the distance she now faced. She cherished these contacts, yet hated the reminder that recognition and camaraderie existed elsewhere, but not here, not now. The paradox was exhausting. Her skills had saved lives. Her precision had prevented disasters. Yet she was now a civilian, invisible to the very society she had protected. Yet amidst this quiet desolation, Emma felt something stirring a small, persistent spark. It was the same spark that had driven her through grueling training, through endless missions, and through moments when failure was not an option. Realized she wasn't entirely lost. There were still ways to act, to apply her expertise, and perhaps to reclaim a sense of purpose. Even if the world had moved on, her skills, her instincts, her precision, these were hers alone. They could still matter. Emma moved to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Lights glimmered in the dusk, reflecting on glass and steel. Somewhere below, life continued, oblivious to the dangers that occasionally lurked in shadows. Somewhere, people depended on the vigilance of individuals like her, unseen, unacknowledged, but essential. She thought of the missions she had completed successfully, the impossible shots she had made, the lives saved silently, without fanfare. A sense of quiet determination settled over her. Perhaps, she mused, there were still battles to fight, still opportunities to act decisively, even if they were not recognized. Perhaps she could step back into the world not for applause, not for medals, but for purpose. The spark inside her ignited into something more tangible, a plan, a mission, a possibility. Emma Carter, once forgotten, was beginning to remember. A power she still held. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A message from a former colleague appeared. "We need you. The city lives at stake. Can you help?" Her fingers hovered over the screen, heart quickening. This was it, the call she had been waiting for. The chance to transform her isolation into action, to reclaim the sense of purpose she thought was lost. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself. The medals, the photographs, the memories weren't just relics of the past. They were proof that she could act with precision, with courage, with unmatched skill. She realized that being forgotten did not mean being powerless. The world may have overlooked her, but she had not forgotten herself, and she would not fail. She stood, moving with a grace born of years of training, eyes focused, mind calculating. Outside, the city continued unaware, but Emma Carter was no longer idle. She was preparing to step back into the shadows, to act decisively, to be the force the world still needed, unseen, unacknowledged, unstoppable. Tonight, the forgotten veteran remembered who she truly was. The city never slept, but tonight its pulse felt frantic, jagged, like a heartbeat that had been startled awake. Emma Carter watched from her apartment window as lights flickered in distant towers, unaware of the storm about to unfold within their streets. News channels had gone into overdrive. A high-profile terrorist had infiltrated the downtown core, threatening a coordinated attack. The government had mobilized elite SEAL snipers, tactical units, and specialized intelligence teams. Yet despite all their skill, all their planning, every attempt to intercept the threat had failed. Emma's jaw tightened as she read headline after headline, a pattern emerging that gnawed at her instincts. The reports were grim. Each article described the terror plot as precise, calculated, and nearly invisible. Officials admitted that previous sniper teams had attempted engagement, but failed to hit their target, citing unexpected movements and unpredictable patterns. Video clips circulated of swarming streets, footage of snipers aiming but missing by mere inches. The public panicked, and social media erupted in speculation, rumors, and fear. Cities had security measures, but even those were falling short. Against a target who seemed to anticipate every maneuver, Emma felt a familiar stir, a mix of anger, adrenaline, and the deep-seated drive to act. She moved away from the window, pacing the apartment, her mind already calculating possibilities. Civilians were at risk, and every second wasted was a second closer to disaster. The SEAL teams were skilled, undoubtedly some of the best in the world, but Emma had a skill set they lacked: experience operating alone, patience for hours, and intuition honed by countless missions where one misstep could cost lives. She visualized the city grid, memorizing street layouts, vantage points, potential escape routes, and blind spots details that no drone or algorithm could fully capture. The news footage played in the background, showing a target that moved with uncanny precision. Emma's heart pounded as she watched the coordinated chaos officers, snipers, and tactical teams repositioning, yet unable to close the distance. The target's movements were erratic to the untrained eye, but she recognized the pattern: calculated, methodical, and designed to frustrate conventional tactics. The SEALs were missing not because of incompetence, but because the mission required a level of patience, focus, and adaptability that could not be executed in teams weighed down by communication delays and procedural constraints. Emma walked to her desk and pulled out a city map, spreading it across the worn surface. Pins marked previous incidents, cameras, and known patrol patterns. Lines connected potential escape paths and choke points. She traced the streets with a finger, visualizing her approach, calculating angles and trajectories as though rehearsing the mission in her mind. Every movement, every position, had to be planned with precision. She was alone, but that was an advantage. There were no orders, no hierarchy, no competing opinions, just her instincts, her skill, and her unwavering focus. Her phone buzzed. A text from a former colleague appearing on the screen. "This is worse than anything we've seen. Snipers can't get a clear shot. People are in danger. We need you." Emma's eyes narrowed. The city had mobilized its best, yet here she was, forgotten, yet uniquely capable. A spark ignited within her chest. The reports of missed shots and failed operations were no longer frustrating abstractions. They were challenges, invitations for someone capable to act decisively. She remembered the missions that had defined her career: silent infiltrations, impossible shots, and lives hanging in the balance. This was no different. Outside, the city throbbed with energy. Sirens wailed in the distance, helicopters circled, and distant explosions rattled windows. The streets were a labyrinth of shadows and artificial lights, civilians scattering in fear. She observed from her apartment, noting exits, alleyways, and vantage points. From above, the scene seemed chaotic, but she saw order in the chaos, a rhythm the target unwittingly followed. This was the precision she thrived on, detecting patterns hidden in apparent randomness, waiting for the single perfect opportunity. Emma gathered her gear, a compact sniper rifle she had maintained meticulously, night vision optics, communication devices, and lightweight tactical clothing. Every item was positioned for efficiency and mobility. She didn't need heavy support, drones, or a team. She needed focus, discipline, and absolute control. She ran through mental checklists, recalling everything she had learned during years of training and deployments. Precision, patience, and perseverance. In missions like these, the margin for error was zero, and Emma had never failed when the stakes were this high. Her mind briefly flicked to the civilians below. She imagined the chaos in the streets, mothers holding children, office workers trapped in buildings, people running for safety with nowhere to hide. The thought steadied her resolve. This wasn't about recognition, medals, or accolades. It was about lives that depended on someone who could act when others could not. Emma had spent years in environments where hesitation was fatal. Now she would use those instincts to tip the balance in favor of survival. Hours passed as she observed, refining her plan. The target moved unpredictably, but patterns emerged. Guards rotated on a strict timing, entry points had blind spots, and escape routes funneled into predictable corridors. Emma noted every detail. Her experience allowed her to anticipate potential obstacles before they appeared. She even simulated sniper angles, wind speed adjustments, and bullet drop, all mentally rehearsing the mission over and over. A target's unpredictability was formidable, but with careful observation and patience, it could be exploited. By midnight, the city's chaos had intensified. Snipers positioned on rooftops, SWAT teams ready at intersections, and law enforcement trying to maintain order all had failed to gain a decisive advantage. The news cameras captured scenes of confusion and fear, showing the limitations of even the most elite forces. Emma's jaw tightened. Watching skilled operators fail was infuriating yet enlightening. She could see where the strategy had faltered. Reliance on coordination over instinct, speed over patience, and technology over experience. She would approach differently alone, silent and deliberate. The tension in the apartment grew palpable. Emma reviewed every surveillance video, every report, every snippet of intelligence she could access. She imagined herself on the rooftops, moving like a shadow, calculating distances and angles with unerring accuracy. This was not just analysis. It was a rehearsal, a prelude to action. Her focus was absolute, mind locked into the rhythm of observation and anticipation. Every potential movement by the target was plotted and countered before it occurred. 4. The first time in weeks, she felt alive, her skills and instincts humming in perfect alignment. Hours bled into the early morning. Emma's vigilance never wavered. The city outside began to show signs of fatigue. Lights dimmed, streets emptied slightly, but danger had not lessened. The target was patient, deliberate, and determined to execute the plan. But Emma had a patience born of long nights in deserts, mountains, and hostile territories. She would wait, she would observe, and she would strike at the precise moment the target exposed vulnerability. Her apartment became a command center of strategy and calculation. She jotted notes, adjusted her plan, and visualized every scenario. Emma's mind was a precise instrument, tuned to the smallest fluctuations in behavior and environment. The frustration of being forgotten, overlooked, and undervalued melted away, replaced by a singular focus: the mission. The city's fate rested on one woman's skill, one mind's relentless calculation, one hand's perfect execution. By dawn, Emma had identified the perfect vantage point. It wasn't the tallest building, nor the one closest to the target. It was the one that combined concealment, stability, and line of sight. Everything she had observed converged into this decision. The SEAL teams had failed because they lacked this type of holistic analysis, constrained by protocol and teamwork. Emma's advantage was simplicity, her skills, her patience, her singular focus. This was her world, and she was ready. As the first light of morning touched the city skyline, Emma Carter stood at her window, gear assembled, mind sharp, heart steady. The target moved below, oblivious to the storm silently descending from above. Civilians were still at risk, the city still in peril, but she had found clarity. One calculated decision, one perfectly timed action, could prevent disaster. And Emma, the forgotten veteran, was ready to remind the world what precision, patience, and experience could achieve. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was more than a mission. It was a reclamation of purpose, a reaffirmation of identity. The world may have overlooked her, but she had not forgotten herself. Tonight, the city's fate rested in her hands. And Emma Carter was not about to fail. Emma Carter's phone buzzed again, cutting through the oppressive silence of her apartment. She glanced at the screen. It was a message from Marcus Vance, a former SEAL, and one of the few people she still trusted. Emma, they're hitting. Dead ends. We need your eyes. We need you. Her fingers hovered over the screen, a mixture of instinct and hesitation tugging at her. For months she had resisted returning to the life she had left behind, the life that had demanded everything, and yet offered little in return. She had convinced herself that she could survive on the margins, but this felt different. Her first reaction was doubt. She had walked away from missions like this before, left them to teams younger, trained, and in active duty. Yet she knew something Marcus couldn't put into words. The ordinary approach would fail here. The city's defenses were strong, and even the most skilled teams were floundering. Their strategy relied on coordination, technology, and procedure, but the target was unpredictable, elusive, and patient. Emma realized that the missing factor was intuition, honed by years of experience. Alone, she could make decisions without delay, without compromise, without interference. She remembered her own hesitation when she first joined the SEALs. The fear, the doubt, the overwhelming sense that she might not survive missions overseas. But those fears had been conquered with discipline, training, and focus. That same rigor still existed in her. Her mind, sharpened over years of planning and executing impossible operations, could handle this. And for the first time in months, Emma felt the old thrill, the heartbeat of purpose that had been dormant, stifled under civilian monotony. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the worn carpet and the shadows that danced along the walls. Memories of her last deployment surfaced, vivid and uncompromising. She remembered crawling across rocky terrain in the dead of night, the rifle snug against her shoulder, the silence broken only by the whispers of her own breath. She remembered the calculated risks, the endless hours waiting for the perfect moment. The tension coiled so tightly, it became a tangible force. And she remembered the feeling of success, the quiet satisfaction of lives saved because she had remained vigilant, precise, and patient. Emma finally typed back, "I'll do it. Tell me what you know." Her pulse accelerated as she read Marcus's reply. Details were sparse locations, probable patterns, and recent failed attempts. The teams had tried to corner the target in open streets, misjudging their movements and giving them time to evade. Emma's eyes narrowed as she absorbed every word. She began to visualize the city as if it were a battlefield she had seen hundreds of times before, every street, every alley, every rooftop a potential vantage point. Her preparation began immediately. Emma spread out maps, blueprints, and intelligence reports across her apartment floor, connecting patterns and movements with colored pens. Every piece of information mattered. Guard rotations, surveillance, blind spots, civilian traffic patterns, weather conditions, and timing intervals. She meticulously noted every detail, forming a mental grid that only she could navigate. Marcus called intermittently, offering updates and confirming her observations. Even then, she worked quietly, methodically, her mind moving faster than any conversation could capture. Her solitude was an advantage. Unlike the active SEAL teams, weighed down by orders, chains of command, and communication delays, she had no interference. Decisions could be made instantly, based purely on instinct and calculated logic. Emma reviewed videos of the target's recent movements, tracking subtle patterns that others had overlooked. Hesitation at intersections, repeated glances over the shoulder, and predictable micro-movements that suggested preferred escape routes. The target was calculating, yes, but predictable in small, critical ways. Emma smiled faintly. She had always excelled in finding patterns in chaos. By the second night, she had drafted a full operational plan. It included vantage points, timing for movement, escape routes, and contingencies for unexpected variables. Emma ran simulations in her mind, visualizing herself on rooftops, scanning for civilians, calculating wind drift, and adjusting for the target's unpredictable movements. Hours passed as if in minutes. Her mind moved through scenarios with a clarity that had become rare in civilian life. Every observation led to a decision. Every calculation led to a precise action. Her thoughts briefly returned to the public perception of snipers, those often glorified in movies and media. The reality was far different. Hours of observation, patience, and painstaking calculations, with lives literally hanging on each choice. One mistake could mean death, not just for her, but for innocents on the streets below. She remembered the weight of responsibility she had carried in missions overseas, and it returned familiar and grounding. The city's fate was a mirror. Of those past operations, scaled differently, but no less urgent. Marcus called again. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice tight over the secure line. Emma exhaled slowly. "I don't need permission," she said. "I only need to make it count." He was silent for a moment, then nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Understood. But promise me, you come back safe." She allowed herself a small smile. "I always come back." Her next step was equipment preparation. She had maintained her rifle meticulously for years, but now it needed full operational readiness. Optics were cleaned and calibrated, ammunition counted and inspected, and tactical gear sorted for mobility and concealment. Every item had a specific purpose. Nothing extraneous would slow her down. In her apartment, she moved with the practiced precision of a veteran, her body remembering movements ingrained through countless drills. Even in civilian clothing, she carried the posture, awareness, and readiness of a soldier. Sleep was minimal. Over the next 2 nights, she would rest for a few hours at a time, then return to observation, simulation, and preparation. Her body was exhausted, but her mind was electric. The thrill of impending action surged through her like a current, awakening every reflex, every intuition honed by years of training. She allowed herself small moments of visualization, imagining the streets emptying, the target presenting a brief opening, her aim steady, her shot precise. The scenarios were endless, but her focus was singular: perfection. Evenings brought quiet reflection. Emma thought of the civilians and risk office workers, families, strangers, oblivious to the danger converging on their city. Each calculation she made was not for glory, but for the people she would never meet, yet whose lives depended on her skill. Her patience deepened, and with it, her sense of purpose. For the first time in months, Emma felt connected to something larger than herself, a mission, a responsibility, a chance to act decisively when failure was not an option. By the 3rd day, her plan was near perfect. Emma had mapped every building, every rooftop, every street intersection relevant to the target. She had accounted for wind, distance, lighting conditions, and timing intervals. Even minor variables, like the swaying of an antenna or the reflection of sunlight on glass, were considered. She had built redundancies, escape plans, and contingencies. For unexpected obstacles. The precision of her preparation gave her confidence, but it also carried the weight of inevitability. One misstep, one miscalculation, and disaster could strike. Emma contacted Marcus one final time before moving to action. "I've identified the vantage," she said. "It's quiet. It's isolated. It's exactly what we need. The target's predictable now, just enough to exploit." He hesitated, concern etched in his voice. "You're sure about doing this alone?" "I've always worked alone," she replied. "It's who I am. It's what I do. Lives depend on it, and I won't hesitate." He didn't argue further. He knew her history, her skills, and her unwavering focus under pressure. All he could do was trust, as he always had, and hope that the forgotten veteran now remembered, by her own instincts, would succeed where others could not. As she prepared to leave the apartment, Emma felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and serenity. The city below remained unaware of the danger and of the silent guardian about to act. Every instinct, every calculation, every skill she had honed over years of deployments converged in this singular moment. She adjusted her gear, checked her optics, and took one final mental review. Precision, patience, and focus, these would guide her tonight. The SEALs had failed, the city was on edge, but Emma Carter was ready. And for the first time in months, she felt entirely alive. Emma Carter crouched over the city map on her apartment floor, her fingers tracing streets, alleys, and rooftops with painstaking precision. The faint glow of a desk lamp illuminated her focused face, highlighting eyes that had once scanned deserts and mountains for threats, now scanning her urban battlefield. She had spent days observing, analyzing, and connecting patterns the active SEAL teams had overlooked. Every misstep, every failed attempt by others became her data points. In this quiet apartment, Emma was both a commander and a soldier, preparing for a mission the world had no idea she was about to execute. She spread out blueprints, surveillance photos, and street camera stills. Each item was scrutinized for flaws or advantages. Roof structures, air vents, fire escapes, and construction cranes all were potential vantage points or obstacles. Emma had to anticipate every variable. The SEAL teams had been meticulous, but their approach was predictable. Coordination and technology over instinct. That reliance had been their downfall. Emma's advantage was simplicity, combined with experience, one person, one mind, one mission, executed with perfect focus. Her hands moved like trained machinery as she marked every observation. Security. Rotations were mapped in color-coded timelines. Entry points, escape routes, and choke points were annotated with exact distances and timings. Even civilian traffic flows were considered. A pedestrian could ruin the perfect shot, a moving car could reflect light, and weather could shift the trajectory by inches. Every element was accounted for, down to the smallest detail. Emma's precision wasn't arrogance, it was survival. One mistake could be fatal. Night fell again, and the city lights shimmered like stars below. Emma visualized herself on rooftops, the rifle snug against her shoulder, eyes scanning the target zone through calibrated optics. She practiced positioning, breathing techniques, and wind calculations mentally, rehearsing scenarios she might encounter. The target was elusive, but predictable in minor ways. A hesitation, a glance over the shoulder, a favored route, all gave her a pattern to exploit. She had honed this skill in combat zones worldwide, detecting the rhythm hidden in chaos and striking when the moment was perfect. She paused to review the failures of others. The SEAL teams had positioned themselves on obvious rooftops, coordinated through radios, and attempted synchronized shots. Communication delays, protocol adherence, and the pressure of being observed had undermined their precision. Emma had none of those constraints. No hierarchy dictated her actions. No one else's stress could throw off her focus. Alone, she could adapt instantly, think freely, and wait indefinitely for the perfect moment. The target's movements were a puzzle she was uniquely equipped to solve. Hours bled into each other as she refined every detail. Calculations for distance, wind speed, and trajectory were mentally rehearsed repeatedly. She had memorized angles, cover points, and line of sight. Measurements. Every possible obstruction: chimneys, water towers, antennas, reflective glass, was accounted for. Emma ran contingency scenarios. What if the target changed direction abruptly? What if civilians moved into the line of sight? What if security patterns shifted unexpectedly? For each possibility, she devised a plan. Precision, patience, and adaptability were her allies. Emma's focus was occasionally interrupted by flashes of memory missions overseas, long nights in hostile territory, the adrenaline of waiting for a perfect shot. She remembered the desert winds, the smell of gunpowder, the quiet tension of a mission in which every decision mattered. Those memories weren't just nostalgia. They were training reinforced by years of experience. Her mind, trained to analyze and anticipate, was alive with possibility. Every instinct was alert, every reflex sharpened. The city below, unaware, had no idea it was about to be protected by someone who had mastered patience and precision over a lifetime. Supplies were prepared meticulously. Her rifle was inspected, cleaned, and sighted for accuracy. Optics were calibrated for long distances and low light conditions. Ammunition was counted, verified, and secured. Tactical clothing was light and unobtrusive, designed for mobility and stealth. Every strap, pocket, and belt had a purpose. Equipment was positioned for efficiency, not show. Emma moved with the fluidity of muscle memory, each motion precise, rehearsed, and deliberate. In her small apartment, she transformed into a battlefield operator, preparing for a mission where failure wasn't an option. Even mental preparation was exhaustive. Emma ran simulations in her mind, every footstep, every breath, every adjustment accounted for. She anticipated the target's potential evasive actions, security personnel movements, and environmental factors. Her mind ran faster than any computer, calculating angles, distances, and timing in real time. The solitude of her preparation allowed absolute concentration. Unlike others constrained by teamwork or communication protocols, she had the freedom to adapt instantly. She knew that patience, more than anything, would be the deciding factor. The shot would not be rushed, and lives depended on it. Emma's body was tense but controlled. She did breathing exercises to maintain calm, muscles ready for precision movements. One misalignment could ruin everything. She remembered the countless hours spent lying in desert sands, waiting for a perfect moment. One shot perfectly executed could change everything. She recalled her training. Always anticipate, never hesitate, maintain control. Tonight, the principles that had kept her alive in hostile lands were her lifeline once more. The city's fate rested on those rules. She visualized the vantage point she had selected. It was isolated yet concealed, elevated but stable, offering a clear line of sight. Security patterns had been observed. Blind spots noted. Civilian movements analyzed. Environmental factors considered. The target's behavior, studied for days, indicated a small, predictable window for engagement. Emma ran through the scenario repeatedly, refining timing, positioning, and reaction strategies. Nothing was left to chance. Failure was unacceptable. Lives depended on her. The city had mobilized its best teams, but she alone had the clarity and patience to succeed. By the early morning hours, Emma had rehearsed and re-rehearsed. She ran every contingency through her mind, anticipating obstacles before they could manifest. Sleep was brief, a few minutes at a time, but her focus never wavered. The mission demanded total cognitive control, and she maintained it with a single-minded intensity. She reviewed the sniper's creed silently. Patience, precision, persistence. Every word echoed in her mind, anchoring her to purpose. The mission was imminent, and she was ready to reclaim the power she had felt slipping away in civilian life. Emma considered the risk of acting alone. There was no backup. No team could intervene if something went wrong. But that risk was manageable. She thrived in situations where others relied on protocol or coordination. Alone, she could think freely, act decisively, and exploit patterns others could not see. Her experience, her skill, and her instincts made her the only candidate capable of neutralizing the threat effectively. The city would never know her name, but that didn't matter. Success and the lives saved were all that counted. Finally, she ran through the plan one last time. Gear checked, vantage analyzed, target behavior memorized, environmental factors accounted for, contingencies rehearsed. Emma Carter, the forgotten veteran, was poised on the brink of action. Her solitude had allowed preparation beyond what any team could achieve. Her mind was sharp, her body ready, and her resolve unwavering. Tonight, she would act with precision, patience, and courage. The SEALs had failed. Civilians were at risk. But Emma Carter, operating alone, had the knowledge, skill, and determination to succeed where others could not. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar hum of anticipation that had defined her career. Every calculation, every observation, every moment of preparation had led to this instant. The city slept unaware, its fate resting on a single individual. She adjusted her gear, secured her rifle, and moved silently to the exit. Each step was deliberate, controlled, measured. Emma Carter, forgotten by the world, was about to become the unseen force that would save it. The impossible mission was no longer theoretical. It was about to unfold. The city below was cloaked in darkness, punctuated only by the occasional street lamp and neon glow from storefronts. Emma Carter moved like a shadow along the rooftops, each step deliberate, silent, practiced. Her rifle was snug against her shoulder, scope calibrated, and gear adjusted for stealth. Every muscle in her body was trained for this moment, every nerve alert to the faintest sound. The city was unaware of the danger it faced or of the forgotten veteran who had stepped into the night to confront it. Her first challenge was distance. She needed a position high enough to see the target zone, yet concealed enough to avoid detection by cameras or patrols. Emma crawled across the roof, eyes scanning the surrounding buildings, wind direction, and reflective surfaces. One misstep could trigger a security alert or give away her position. But years of rooftop operations had taught her patience. The perfect vantage point required waiting, observing, and moving only when conditions were ideal. Below, streets teemed with shadows of potential interference. Civilians leaving bars, maintenance workers on late shifts, and occasional police patrols. Emma accounted for every movement. A passing figure could inadvertently ruin the line of sight or reflect light onto her hiding spot. Her mind tracked trajectories, distances, and angles, while also anticipating changes in the environment. The challenge wasn't just the target, it was everything surrounding it. She adjusted her position, using ventilation units and parapet walls for cover, ensuring no reflective surface could betray her presence. Security patterns were predictable but nuanced. Guards walked predetermined paths, sometimes stopping to inspect blind spots or scan the streets below. Emma had studied their schedules extensively and memorized rotations down to the second. But human unpredictability remained. Someone could be late or early. Every observation was mental rehearsal. She visualized herself in different positions, calculating angles for every possible movement the target could make. Precision required anticipating the unknown, and Emma's instincts were honed to detect even subtle deviations. The first major obstacle came quickly: a rooftop maintenance. Crew emerged from a nearby building, setting up scaffolding and equipment. Emma froze, heart rate steady, and calculated her options. She could wait for their routine to end, or she could adjust her position slightly, blending into shadows and architectural features. Timing was critical. She shifted lightly, feeling the stability of the rooftop beneath her. Not a single footstep made a sound. Her body moved with the grace of someone who had spent years mastering silence and stealth. Hours passed as she maneuvered across rooftops, weaving through shadows, avoiding cameras, and recalibrating optics at each new vantage. She observed the target from a distance, noting micro-patterns: a favored route through the streets, hesitations, near intersections, brief pauses that suggested awareness of surveillance. The target was cautious, but not infallible. Emma's advantage was patience. She could wait indefinitely for the perfect opening. Every failed attempt by SEAL teams had been impulsive, rushed. She would act only when conditions aligned perfectly. Her own breath was controlled, deliberate. She recalled every lesson learned in hostile environments: breath control, pulse regulation, patience under pressure. The rifle's trigger rested lightly under her finger, a familiar weight that brought calm. Emma's focus narrowed, everything outside her immediate calculations fading. She wasn't thinking about accolades, recognition, or even fear. This was about execution, precision, and saving lives. The city's fate rested on her ability to maintain composure, patience, and accuracy. Unexpectedly, a drone hovered nearby, scanning for activity in the area. Emma's eyes narrowed. The technology could expose her position. She paused, holding her breath, analyzing its flight pattern and predicting its movement. With careful timing, she adjusted her position, ducking behind a vent, letting the drone pass without incident. Her mind ran several scenarios at once: target movement, potential civilian interference, environmental factors, and the presence of surveillance technology. This simultaneous calculation, second by second, was familiar territory for Emma. Few could sustain such focus without faltering. She had positioned herself within striking distance, but the final approach demanded patience. Even a slight miscalculation could expose her. Emma moved with the precision of someone who had navigated hostile zones under fire. Each handhold, foothold, and weight shift executed silently. The rifle remained aligned with her line of sight, scope calibrated for distance, wind, and trajectory. She had accounted for building sway, gusts of wind, and even subtle vibrations from the city below. Everything was calculated. Nothing was left to chance. Time became a fluid concept. Minutes stretched into hours as Emma adjusted her vantage. Incrementally, each micromovement designed to maintain cover and line of sight. She reviewed mental simulations repeatedly. If the target moved left, she would shift slightly. If security rotated too early, she would pause. If a civilian entered the line of sight, she would wait for them to clear. This mental rehearsal was as critical as the physical movements. One error, no matter how small, could compromise the mission. The city slept, oblivious. Emma felt a strange calm in the tension, the same calm she had experienced in hostile environments where lives hung on the edge of each decision. Her senses were heightened: the faint rustle of papers, the distant hum of a generator, the subtle echo of footsteps on concrete. Every sound was analyzed, categorized, and integrated into her mental map. Her position was secure, her line of sight optimal, and her body ready. She waited. Patience was her ally. She considered her solo approach. Unlike the SEAL teams, constrained by radio communications, protocol, and coordination, she could act with complete autonomy. Decisions were instantaneous, reactive, and precise. The pressure of acting alone was balanced by total control. Number. One else could compromise her timing. No one else could disrupt her focus. The city's defenses had relied on numbers and technology, but Emma relied on intuition and experience. One disciplined sniper could achieve what teams had failed to do collectively. Finally, the target presented a small window. A momentary pause near a street corner, a brief lapse in attention, just long enough to align the shot. Emma's heartbeat remained steady, her finger lightly brushing the trigger. Years of training surged through her in a focused rush. Breath, control, wind calculation, trajectory analysis, environmental factors. Her scope aligned perfectly with the opening. Everything was in place. Every calculation, every observation, every hour of preparation led to this moment. She inhaled deeply, visualizing the path of the shot. Civilians below were clear. Security movements were predictable. Environmental factors were accounted for. Emma exhaled, adjusting for micro-movements. The city's fate rested on the next few seconds, and her mind was sharp, precise, unflinching. This was the culmination of days of preparation, observation, and calculation. The impossible approach was executed flawlessly. And yet, the challenge of the approach was not over. A security guard changed his route unexpectedly, patrolling closer than predicted. Emma froze, assessing distance, speed, and reaction time. With minimal movement, she adjusted position slightly, staying low and unseen. The guard passed, oblivious. Her patience had paid off. The mission's success depended not just on the shot, but on the flawless execution of approach, positioning, and timing. Hours of infiltration had brought her to this pivotal point. Her vantage was secure, her line of sight unobstructed, and her body prepared. Emma felt the familiar mix of adrenaline, anticipation, and clarity that defined critical operations. The city below remained unaware, its fate dependent on a single veteran who had been overlooked by the world. She checked her optics one final time, aligned her shot, and waited for the precise moment to act. The moment was near. Emma's training, experience, and patience had brought her to the edge of execution. The SEAL teams had failed. Technology had failed, and yet one forgotten veteran remained silent, unseen, and entirely in control. The next action would define the mission. Precision, patience, and adaptability would determine success. Emma Carter, operating alone, had infiltrated. Successfully. The impossible approach was complete. Emma Carter's body remained perfectly still, crouched behind the parapet of the building she had chosen as her vantage point. The city below lay in uneasy silence, unaware of the threat lingering among its streets or of the silent figure watching from above. Hours of meticulous observation, careful calculation, and patient infiltration had led her to this single moment. Everything had been accounted for. Distance, wind, line of sight, environmental variables, and potential interference. Every heartbeat, every breath, every subtle adjustment mattered. Failure was not an option. Lives depended on her precision. Her rifle was an extension of her body, the stock molded to her shoulder, scope aligned perfectly, and finger resting lightly near the trigger. Emma ran through mental checks one last time. Scope calibration verified, wind speed accounted for, target behavior memorized, civilian zones clear. She had simulated this scenario repeatedly in her mind, each variation considered, each contingency planned. The SEAL teams below had missed because they had acted too quickly, under pressure and without the luxury of total control. Emma had waited. Now the moment had arrived. The target emerged from the shadows, moving with deliberate care, unaware of the sniper trained on him. Emma's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled, her mind razor-sharp. Years of experience had taught her that timing was everything. A slight hesitation could change the angle, the distance, the trajectory. Emma adjusted her position minimally, accounting for the faint sway of the building beneath her. She visualized the path of the shot, the trajectory, and the moment of release. Every calculation converged in perfect alignment. Civilians moved intermittently below, but Emma had accounted for their positions. Her mental map incorporated their movements, predicting when streets would clear and when brief openings would appear. She imagined every micro-movement of the target, every glance, every step, every subtle hesitation. Experience had taught her to detect these subtle cues, to exploit them without hesitation. This was not just shooting. It was timing, precision, and anticipation combined into a single act. Emma had spent a lifetime preparing for this. The wind shifted slightly, and she adjusted her aim accordingly. A streetlight flickered in the distance, its glare momentarily threatening to reveal her position. She waited for it to pass. A faint noise from a nearby rooftop, a bird, perhaps, or a loose panel, caused her to pause, recalibrate, and remain unseen. Every variable mattered. Every distraction could have catastrophic consequences. Her patience had become as precise a tool as her rifle, and she wielded it effortlessly. The target stopped briefly at an intersection, consulting a small device in his hand. The pause was the opening she had been waiting for. Emma's breath slowed, and she synchronized her heartbeat with her mental calculations. Distance, angle, wind speed, bullet drop, all were perfectly aligned. She exhaled slowly, her finger brushing the trigger lightly, ready to release at the precise instant. Years of missions, countless hours of training, and meticulous preparation had led to this. Her mind narrowed to a singular focus. One shot, one chance, one outcome. The city's fate hung on her decision. Every instinct, every calculation, every moment of patience converged. This was the culmination of days of observation, planning, and infiltration. The target, unaware, represented the threat that had eluded the best-trained teams. But Emma Carger, the forgotten veteran, had positioned herself to succeed where others had failed. Her hands were steady, her breath controlled, her focus absolute. As she prepared to take the shot, she reviewed contingencies. What if the target moved? What if civilians appeared suddenly? What if an unseen variable disrupted the trajectory? Each scenario had a response, already rehearsed and memorized. She was not rushing. Impulse had no place here. Only precision mattered. Only the perfect alignment of variables could ensure success. Emma's patience, honed over years in hostile environments, allowed her to remain composed while the chaos of the city unfolded below. The target made a slight adjustment, turning partially toward an alley. The momentary shift created a perfect line of sight. Emma's pulse was steady. Her finger brushed the trigger in synchronization with her mental calculation. The wind was accounted for, the distance calibrated, and the target's micro-movement anticipated. She exhaled softly, feeling the rifle recoil lightly in her shoulder as she squeezed the trigger with absolute control. The shot was released, a single, precise decision executed flawlessly. Silence followed. For a heartbeat, the city seemed suspended, unaware of the impact that had just occurred. The target collapsed, neutralized instantly, leaving no opportunity for further threat. Emma's body relaxed slightly, though her senses remained alert, scanning for any unforeseen developments. Civilians below continued their movements, oblivious to the danger that had been removed. Her training demanded vigilance even after the shot, and she maintained it, eyes scanning, ears attuned, mind calculating possible residual risks. The aftermath was swift and silent. Security forces eventually discovered the neutralized threat, but the origin of the decisive action remained unknown. Emma's role, like many of her past successes, would go unrecognized publicly. Yet the lives saved, the city preserved from catastrophe, were real, tangible outcomes of her precision and dedication. She exhaled slowly, allowing herself a momentary sense of accomplishment. Tempered by the knowledge that her work was far from complete, her mind replayed the mission in micro-detail. Every step, every calculation, every adjustment had been executed perfectly. The shot was not a product of luck. It was the result of preparation, observation, and flawless execution. Emma had acted where teams had failed, not through brute force, but through patience, precision, and strategy. This was the essence of her expertise, the ability to perform under pressure, to calculate the seemingly impossible, and to achieve results that others could not. Despite the success, Emma remained vigilant. The city's threat had been neutralized, but the potential for further danger lingered. Her instincts remained alert, scanning for anomalies, unexpected movements, or emergent threats. Years of combat experience had taught her that complacency was fatal. Even after the perfect shot, the mission was not truly complete until the environment was secure, civilians were safe, and escape routes were clear. Her awareness extended to every element of her surroundings. Finally, after hours of observation post-engagement, Emma began her exfiltration. She retraced her infiltration route, moving silently across rooftops, avoiding cameras, and minimizing exposure. Her training ensured efficiency, each movement measured, each step controlled. The city continued unaware of her presence, the threat neutralized without fanfare. This was the reality of precision operations. Success often invisible, impact tangible. Emma had acted decisively, and the consequences would ripple through the city without recognition of the agent who made it possible. As she reached the relative safety of her temporary concealment, Emma allowed herself a brief reflection. The mission had been executed perfectly, yet the outcome remained unacknowledged. Official reports would cite unidentified forces, or successful intervention by law enforcement, leaving her contributions invisible to the public. But Emma did not seek recognition. Her satisfaction came from the knowledge that lives were saved, threats neutralized, and that her skills had made a difference. This was the essence of her identity, the unseen, precise, and unwavering protector. Emma's body ached from hours of static positioning and controlled movement, yet her mind remained sharp. She allowed herself a quiet moment of pride calm, measured and internalized. Success was rarely celebrated publicly in operations like this. The world often remained unaware of the silent guardians who operated in the shadows. She had once been celebrated, then forgotten. Tonight, she had reclaimed her purpose, acting decisively where others had failed, embodying the patience, precision, and courage that defined her career. She exhaled, lowering her rifle carefully, scanning her surroundings one final time. The city slept on, lives intact because of one forgotten veteran's skill, patience, and relentless focus. Emma Carter had proven that preparation, observation, and decisiveness could achieve what teams, technology, and protocol had failed to accomplish. She had acted alone, without recognition, yet with total effectiveness. Her mission, her responsibility, and her execution were flawless, a testament to the abilities honed over years of disciplined training. Emma Carter finally allowed herself to move with deliberate slowness, exfiltrating from the rooftop where she had executed the critical shot. The adrenaline that had surged through her body for hours gradually ebbed, replaced by a quiet, controlled awareness. The city below continued its unaware rhythm, pedestrians crossing streets, vehicles humming past, lights flickering in office towers. None of them would know the threat had been neutralized, or that it had been her hands that had done it. For Emma, recognition was irrelevant. Precision and success mattered far more than accolades. Yet a familiar sting of invisibility began to settle in. She moved across the rooftops, tracing the path she had meticulously planned during the past. 3 days. Every step was cautious, deliberate, and executed to minimize sound. Roof vents, antennas, and shadows provided cover, just as she had anticipated. Her muscles ached, but fatigue was secondary to caution. Years of training had taught her that a mission was only truly complete once the operative was safely removed from the environment. Emma was thorough, experienced, and disciplined. She would not take shortcuts, not even in returning to relative safety. The city's emergency response unfolded below. Police and tactical units swarmed areas where the threat had been neutralized. Cameras and drones monitoring the perimeter. Official statements would later describe a successful intervention by unidentified forces. Media coverage praised law enforcement, while the public lauded coordination and rapid response. Emma allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. They would never know her name. Yet she had acted decisively, flawlessly, and saved countless lives. For her, that knowledge was enough. The mission's success was tangible, even if unacknowledged. She paused on a fire escape, allowing herself to catch her breath. Emma's mind replayed the operation in precise detail, the hours of observation, the infiltration across rooftops, the patient waiting for the critical moment, the shot that neutralized the threat. Each step had been executed according to plan. She had anticipated the target's movements, accounted for environmental factors, and adjusted for unexpected variables. The success had been deliberate, meticulous, and wholly dependent on her experience and skill. Recognition, she reminded herself, was a luxury she did not need. Still, a sense of isolation gnawed at her. The world had forgotten her once. Now, even in the most critical act of service, it would fail to remember her. Medal ceremonies, press releases, and accolades belonged to teams, institutions, and faceless heroes. She had once sought validation from the public and her peers, but over the years, she had learned the truth. Impact mattered more than acknowledgement. And yet, it was human to desire recognition, to want one's actions remembered. Emma felt a twinge of longing, quickly suppressed by professional resolve. Her exfiltration route led her through darkened alleys, shadowed streets, and stairwells, each step calculated for safety and minimal exposure. Emma's senses remained sharp. Every sound, every shift of light, every distant movement was catalogued mentally. The city was alive with noise and movement, but none of it threatened her. She moved like a ghost, her presence undetectable, her mission accomplished. The contrast between her invisibility and the magnitude of her actions was stark, yet familiar. This was the life she had chosen, the life she had trained for, and the life she had embraced despite societal forgetfulness. She finally reached a secluded corner of the city, a safe extraction point, preselected during her planning. There, she allowed herself to pause completely, removing her rifle from her shoulder, checking its integrity, and securing her gear. Operation had gone flawlessly. The threat neutralized without civilian casualties. Every calculation had been precise, every contingency executed, and every observation accounted for. Emma's focus remained unwavering, but a quiet exhaustion settled into her muscles and mind. Her body bore the evidence of hours of sustained vigilance and precision movement. Even in success, Emma's thoughts drifted to the broader reality of her life. She had saved countless lives in her career, yet the world often moved on without notice. Today was no different. The SEAL teams would receive commendations for their coordination. Media outlets would celebrate law enforcement, and public attention would fade within days. Emma's contributions remained hidden, her identity as the operative anonymous. Recognition had been denied, not out of malice, but due to the nature of precision work silent, unseen and deeply consequential. She sat in the quiet, allowing herself to reflect. There was pride, yes, but also the familiar ache of invisibility. Her service had always been defined by action rather than acknowledgement, by success rather than fame. Yet the longing for remembrance was inescapable. Emma considered the paradox. She craved nothing more than the fulfillment of her skill, yet desired that her dedication be understood, even if only by a handful of peers. That desire was tempered by reality. The life of a silent guardian was rarely celebrated. Her phone buzzed, breaking the moment of reflection. A text from Marcus appeared. "The city is secure." Incredible work. No one could have done it better. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. Marcus understood, yet even he could not share the story publicly. That was not his fault nor hers. Recognition was fleeting, and the truth of her impact was something only she could carry. Emma typed back, "Thank you. It's done. The city sleeps." The simplicity of the message reflected the clarity of her mindset. Mission completed. Lives saved. That was enough. As dawn approached, Emma began her return to her apartment. The city was stirring again, delivery trucks, commuters, early joggers, but none had a clue of the danger that had passed unnoticed. Every life preserved was a silent testament to her precision, patience, and skill. Emma had operated in the shadows, executing the impossible alone, and emerged unrecognized. Yet the invisibility was almost comforting, a cloak that allowed her to exist without interference, to act decisively when others hesitated. Her thoughts drifted briefly to the broader implications of her work. The mission had been a success, yet it highlighted the limitations of conventional systems. Technology, coordination, and protocol had failed. Only experience, instinct, and unwavering patience had achieved the result. Emma's career had prepared her uniquely for this moment. The world had overlooked her skills, yet in this critical hour she had proven that one disciplined, trained, and focused individual could surpass the collective efforts of entire teams. Despite the success, Emma felt no triumph in public terms. There would be no accolades, no ceremonies, no headlines bearing her name. That reality was both familiar and challenging. Her identity as a hero was invisible, yet her impact undeniable. The paradox was bittersweet, fulfillment and isolation intertwined, a satisfaction of accomplishment tempered by societal indifference. Emma's life had always balanced these forces, and tonight was no exception. Finally, she returned to the quiet of her apartment, the familiar walls, the muted hum of the city below. Her gear was stowed, rifle secured, and her body allowed a rare moment of rest. Yet her mind remained active, replaying the mission, analyzing each decision, and anticipating potential follow-ups. Success had been achieved, but vigilance remained, a constant companion. Emma had acted decisively, precisely, and successfully, but the world would never know. Recognition had been denied, and she accepted it, as always, with quiet resolve. She stared at the photograph of herself in uniform, medals gleaming faintly in the lamp's glow. Once she had been celebrated. Now she was forgotten by most. Yet tonight she had acted where recognition was irrelevant, where her skill alone determined the outcome. Emma Carter had fulfilled her purpose, executing precision and patience with unmatched expertise. The city was safe, lives preserved, and a threat neutralized, all without her name attached to the story. That knowledge, silent and absolute, was enough. Emma allowed herself a long, steady breath. The city slept on, oblivious to the life she had saved. Recognition might never come, but impact did. Her mission had been perfect, her execution flawless. Invisibility was a companion she had long accepted, and tonight it felt less like a burden and more like a mantle. She had acted decisively alone and successfully. The world may have denied her recognition, but she had never denied herself purpose, skill, or commitment. Emma Carter returned to the quiet of her apartment, the city humming softly below her. Dawn broke, painting the skyline with pale light, yet the streets remained oblivious to the chaos that had been averted overnight. She removed her tactical gear carefully, placing each piece in its designated spot, her movements deliberate and methodical. The rifle, the optics, the communication devices all cleaned, stored, and ready for the next mission that might never come. She exhaled, a mix of exhaustion, relief, and a strange satisfaction settling into her chest. The threat was neutralized, the city saved, and the mission impossible to others had been executed flawlessly. Despite her fatigue, Emma's mind remained alert, replaying each moment of the operation in meticulous detail. The infiltration, the calculated adjustments, the patient waiting, all had converged into the critical shot that ensured lives would continue uninterrupted below her vantage point. The city slept, unaware, yet every detail of her mission testified to hours of preparation, observation, and unwavering focus. She had acted where elite teams had failed, not through brute force, but through precision, patience, and the disciplined application of her skills. The success was undeniable, yet invisible. The phone buzzed again. Marcus's message appeared. They're calling it a miracle. Incredible work, Emma. The city owes you more than it knows. She allowed herself a small, private smile, the acknowledgement silent yet meaningful. Recognition in the public sphere was impossible. Her actions would remain classified, uncredited, and mostly invisible. And yet, in that moment, she felt a quiet validation. Success, she reminded herself, was measured not by applause or headlines, but by outcomes. Lives were saved. The impossible had been accomplished. Emma poured herself a cup of coffee, the steam curling lazily toward the ceiling. She sank into her worn chair, allowing herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. Forgotten by the world she had served, overlooked and underestimated, she had nonetheless risen to meet a challenge that few could even comprehend. The city had mobilized its best, yet it was the one person deemed inconsequential, the veteran, the forgotten operative who had succeeded. She allowed herself a brief sense of pride, tempered by the quiet acceptance of invisibility. Her reflection turned inward. Recognition had always been fleeting in her world. Missions were rarely publicized, victories rarely celebrated beyond the internal acknowledgement of peers and commanders. Over the years, she had grown accustomed to anonymity, the quiet understanding that the work itself, not the recognition, was the measure of value. And tonight, as the city slept safely below, she understood the paradox fully. The absence of accolades did not diminish her impact. In fact, it underscored the purity of her purpose. Action, not attention, defined her. Hours later, as sunlight filtered through the blinds, Emma reviewed the operation one final time. Every movement, every calculation, every contingency had been executed flawlessly. The target neutralized, the civilians unharmed, and the mission complete. The city's infrastructure and population remained unaware of the danger they had narrowly escaped. That invisibility, once a source of frustration, now felt like a protective cloak. She had operated outside recognition, free from interference, accountable only to her own standards. Her mission had been perfect. That, she realized, was her true reward. Her thoughts drifted to the broader implications. The city had relied heavily on technology, coordination, and protocol. The SEAL teams had deployed with precision and expertise, but had been thwarted by unpredictability and timing. Emma's success lay in her ability to anticipate, adapt, and execute independently. Experience, intuition, and patience had prevailed over the combined might of systems and teams. In a world increasingly reliant on technology and bureaucracy, Her actions were a reminder of the irreplaceable value of human skill, judgment, and discipline. Emma stood and moved to the window, gazing at the city as it stirred to life. Commuters poured into the streets, buses rumbled along predetermined routes, and office workers filed into buildings, unaware of the danger that had been neutralized hours earlier. She felt a strange kinship with the city, simultaneously connected and separate. Her work had ensured its continued function, yet she remained a ghost, a silent guardian whose presence would never be known. The paradox of her service impact, without recognition, was both humbling and empowering. She considered her own journey, once celebrated, now forgotten, yet still capable of decisive action when circumstances demanded it. Her identity had been shaped by missions that required absolute focus, total discipline, and unwavering commitment. Tonight's operation had reinforced her belief that skill and patience could achieve the impossible, even in the absence of acknowledgement. Emma had demonstrated that effectiveness was not measured by applause, but by outcomes, precision, and responsibility. The city slept, and her success, though unseen, was absolute. Her phone buzzed again, an encrypted message from Marcus, confirming the operation's official closure. Classified reports would attribute the success to unidentified tactical intervention, ensuring the mission's details remained secret. The acknowledgement she received was personal, discreet, and deeply meaningful. Emma read the message twice, absorbing the rare but quiet recognition. She responded simply, "Mission complete, lives protected. That's enough." Her words reflected her philosophy: impact over fame, duty over recognition, precision over speed. She had acted alone, yet decisively, and the results spoke for themselves. Emma's mind drifted to the personal implications of her service. She had sacrificed comfort, security, and sometimes peace of mind in pursuit of duty. Recognition had been rare, acknowledgement even rarer, yet her commitment never wavered. Tonight, as the city continued unaware, she felt a profound satisfaction in her role. The invisible victories, the unrecognized missions, the lives preserved, these were the true markers of her legacy. She understood that heroism did not require applause. It required courage, discipline, and unwavering commitment. Even as she prepared for a brief rest, Emma reviewed the mission in her mind one final time. Infiltration had been flawless, observation precise, and execution decisive. Every calculation had been exact, every contingency accounted for, every movement deliberate. The mission, the impossible task that had eluded teams and technology alike, had been accomplished by one disciplined, focused, and experienced individual. Emma Carter, forgotten by most, had ensured the safety of countless lives, embodying the silent, unseen power of expertise, patience, and action. She allowed herself a deep exhale, closing her eyes for a moment of reflection. Recognition denied did not diminish her satisfaction. Invisibility did not erode her impact. Emma's silent victory was complete. The city was safe, the threat eliminated, and the outcome had been determined by skill, preparation, and unwavering focus. She had acted decisively where others faltered, and in that knowledge she found fulfillment. The world might never know her name, yet her actions had spoken louder than any accolade ever could. As sunlight bathed her apartment in warmth, Emma rose and moved toward the door, ready to face whatever challenges the world might present next. The life of a silent guardian demanded vigilance, adaptability, and courage. Recognition might never come, but impact, she knew, was enduring. She had reclaimed her purpose, demonstrated her unmatched skill, and preserved countless lives without acknowledgement. Emma Carter, the forgotten veteran, had achieved a victory that was silent yet absolute, invisible yet decisive, personal yet profoundly consequential. The city, vast and unaware, carried on. But in the quiet corners, on rooftops, and in the shadows, Emma's presence lingered not as fame, but as protection, precision, and proof that one determined individual could alter the course of events. The impossible had been achieved. She had acted decisively, alone, and perfectly. The world might forget, but the lives saved would endure. And in that silent victory, Emma found the ultimate affirmation of her skill, courage, and unwavering dedication.